Welcome to this Ask Me Anything live from PerfBytes. So
Willkommen.
it's incredible. For those who are not following us, we started this live event, live Ask Me Anything, just after this Christmas. It was like the Christmas gift of PerfBytes for the community was this Ask Me Anything special for holiday, and now we're gonna try to have that quite more regular a regular pace. So I think probably one per month.
Yeah.
And we will have all the PerfByte producer available there. And today we have Mark with us as usual.
Yes.
Oh,
And Henrik, I'll introduce you. Henrik Rexed, also known as the amazing performance chef of latter years. Now, the investigator of all things observable on the Is It Observable YouTube channel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You and I are both on Twitch. We're on Twitch right now. I followed you, and I didn't know that K6 was on Twitch. So the performance people were taking over Twitch because performance is like gaming.
it is, and I think I guess if you play video games, you like technology, or you like some stuff, and so you can stop watching video related to tutorials on how to beat the master boss of the level 3 and join us now for asking question about performance, because at the end
Yes,
of the day it will be very useful for your favorite video games for sure.
that makes good sense to me. I think. Plus, I think performance is if you think about advancements in GPUs or any kind of very specific, like CPU speed, everything, like gamers and the gaming industry have always been like 8 steps ahead, pushing for more performance and speed, raw frequency optimizations and enhancements, memory optimizations, the whole multiple GPU synchronization, super fast synchronization. That's all, and then we bring that back to run, e-commerce websites and databases.
It's true.
But really, it's about polygons per second,
Or a couple of bytes per second, I guess, but
bytes
a
per
couple of
second, bits
yeah.
per second, exactly. Henrik's, what's new generally? How are the observable things happening?
Zero Observable is getting fire. So I think in order to start properly the year and make sure that I'm pushing the right content for you for the community, I did like a sort of post-mortem analysis. Why, why are we here on Earth? What's the value? What's the objective? And
Yes.
so I went into a cave during a couple of days, and I came out and I say, okay, I know why we are here. No, just teasing. So I don't know if you, for those who follows me on YouTube, I changed a couple of things here and there just to adjust and be better. So if you like that, the change that I may have made on the show, especially on the music intro
Yeah.
and other stuff, let me know. At least I know that you saw the difference, and that will go directly to my heart. This note, but no, the idea is that, again, to make some better content, shorter content, so then you can consume it in an easy way. But otherwise, on the news of the channel, I recently released one episode related to how to instrument your code utilizing open telemetry, and
Yeah.
so I did the first piece with a special guest, Yoshi Yamaguchi from Google. A
Yeah.
very interesting interview, by the way. And now I'm finishing the post production of the part 2, which is the tutorial. And I have a lot of interesting things to share because I decided to utilize K6 in this tutorial, because this tutorial is just to instrument your code. So I need traces. So I need some traffic that will produce those traces. So I decided to use K6 to do that. So I could share some my experience,
Yeah,
my
and a shout out to Leandro and other PerfBytes folks in the K6 world, who are now in K6 and Grafana. Are you much of a Grafana user?
I use Grafana in most of the tutorials, so I really like
Yeah.
Grafana. I also like I really like the way they have designed their logging solution. So Loki, Loki is
Yeah.
really interesting, and I think the LogQL that they came out is really interesting. I think that brings a lot of a new way. of handling this. It's avoid building complex log stream pipelines. So I really like that. So yeah,
Cool.
big shout to the Grafana Labs teams for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, awesome. So yeah, tell me. I've actually never used the K6 stuff. So that would, if I'm going to ask us anything, I'll ask you. Hey, what was your experience like after being, like me, you use Load Runner for how many years, and then you like go out and try these things, coming from the neo load world, and not that you hadn't used other tools, but yeah, how was the experience, and what were your what do you like about it?
I think I wanted to utilize K6 first of all because I wanted to learn how to use it. I looked at I was saying the basic tutorials to send a request, do some stuff, and then I said, okay, let's build a scenario for the hipster shop because hipster shop is the online boutique provided by Google, and I use it usually for my tutorials. And I went through this the journey of building a script. So the script was fairly easy, to be honest. Again, I think you won't test the same thing when then, for example, testing it from with a recorder because it
Yeah,
makes your life easier. But I think if you have to build a technical test, it's doing a great job for that. And
yeah,
a couple of years back, I was a bit disappointed, or not disappointed, but I was expecting to have some reports or something to get the statistics back, and they have plugins for that. And in my case, I tested their Prometheus integration. So it's basically K6 writes statistics directly to your Prometheus server during the
nice.
test. And at the end of the day, what you have is you go to Grafana, and then you can build all the relevant dashboards that you need to track transaction, URL, response times, bytes per second, well, I mean, anything that you expect from a load testing tools, by the way. So I think it's doing really well the job, honestly. And I didn't go so far to the journey of testing the Kubernetes operator because they have a Kubernetes
Right.
operator, the K6 operator. So I promised myself that I need to do a try on this one, so which I'm going to do. But at least now I went to the journey where I take K6, the default one, and I build the K6 tool by adding some plugins. So I tried out their distributed tracing plugin.
Yeah,
And I think this is a call for all the load testing vendors that are out there on the market and listen to or ask me anything now. They have this experimental feature that they provide. Initially, I thought that well, it doesn't do it much, but in my case, because I wanted to uh, to show the value of open telemetry in this tutorial, I thought,
yeah,
yeah, K6 has this plugin which is pretty amazing, and what it does, it starts an open telemetry trace, and then send it over to the requests, and then if your application is generating open telemetry, then you will have a trace ID. So then the application will add to your existing trace K6 traces that you've started all the other spans. And as a consequence, when you look at your observability backend, in my case, it's Dynatrace, then you can
yeah.
see the client with all the attributes related to the client that has sent that request from a K6 perspective. And then you go down to the code. And I thought that
Right.
was just great. I loved it.
I'm thinking of the old X Dynatrace test, the headers you used to do, right? So that's like request attributes you'd set up in profiling in Dynatrace, or you would actually reap those from an HTTP header. So open telemetry, do you get much different out of it from an entry point perspective? Because it's still a load, but you can monitor the load generator, you could pull in all the stats, all the stuff, right?
Yeah, but I think what is great, I mean, at least if you combine your load testing solution with an observability solution, which is
Yeah,
what we do now these days, we all use observability backends now for our tests. At least I hope so. I hope so. If you
yeah,
don't, then you should try out Dynatrace for sure.
yeah, yeah,
but
absolutely. Free trial.
no, I think the header that we were adding to Dynatrace was a way of catching it with
Yeah,
their feature called request attributes, which was
yeah,
doing the really awesome job, to be honest. But now, because you have traces, and then if you use Dynatrace, it will catch the traces with the one agent and attach it to the right services. So then you will see the traffic as well. So which means I don't have to customize my load testing product if I
Right.
am open telemetry compatible, where I'm starting the trace. Then all those observability backend can already have bring value to your load testing product, to your load testing
Yeah.
results. And I think that was I was so excited about that. And I'm
Yeah. It's.
wondering
Go ahead.
I'm wondering if this feature that K6 came out a couple of months back now, if it's available on other solutions, because that would be interesting to see if other solutions out there on the market provides that open telemetry support.
Yeah, I think that if there is a situation where you don't have, let's say you're generating load through systems that do not have some kind of hooking to pick up those headers. So let's say you didn't have an agent that was hooked in to the web server or app server infrastructure, then having a secondary observability piece that doesn't have that overhead is the observability piece might be tracing, but not totally hooked in, just looking at other things going, yep, there are requests coming in. Yes, these are originating IPs. So you might need that to say, I know there's load generating, but it goes through two steps, and then I'm connecting the trace on the back end. There's a disruption in the chain from the span, but you would still be able to capture something when you don't have control over the whole architecture as well. Because you would need that for, if you're going to use an HTTP header, the first web server you hit has to be where you're listening for that stuff.
But I think from the moment you know that your system is generating open telemetry traces,
Yeah,
then I think there is no question. And you know that
yeah,
you will be able to separate your views sort of and their traces that will be generated out of that. And
yeah,
I was thinking, I don't know for those who've been involved in that type of project, but you test, for example, a SaaS platform like Salesforce a couple of years back. They were providing you a small sandbox, which was quite a joke sometimes, but
yeah,
never mind. And and then you were sending traffic, but you were trying to stress the connections that were going to your backend. And if you were using any monitoring solution, you were running in the dark because you were sending some traffic to a source, but then the traffic coming back to your backend was coming from another source. So you will have to create the right filters to feed to see properly the incoming traffic in your system. So, but
yeah. Cool.
now if Salesforce, I have no idea if Salesforce does it, but if Salesforce is OpenTelemetry compatible, that means that wow, it's just beautiful. I can see the trace coming from the client, going to Salesforce, doing anything in Salesforce, going
Yeah,
back down to the backend, and then I have the full end-to-end trace. That will be just magic.
yeah. So if there's a plugin to the K2, they author the plugin, or was it another open telemetry plugin? Then they
No,
wrapped
no,
it.
no. It's available. So it's been flagged as experimental as of now.
Yeah, yeah,
But you have to every of those plugin needs to be built. So if you want to utilize it, it means you will have to build your own Docker image. But
yeah.
everything is well described. So there is a tool called XK6.
Yep.
Then you can build and add to that build various plugins coming from GitHub. So Prometheus, for example,
Right.
um, distributed tracing, for example, and so on.
Yeah, yeah. Cool. Well, speaking of distributed tracing, my company we've come full around to all the terrible solutions for APM over the years. And meanwhile, I've been, dropping hints about this great company with these great solutions called Dynatrace. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we're actually formally going through an eval process, and I'm kind of leading us, all the different groups, from getting into it. And boy, I'm an old Appmon user. Like, I was from the first generation of Dynatrace NIST, and the whole new animal is fantastic. But I will tell you one thing, Henrik. Over the years, I think even at one of the Perform conferences early on, somebody asked me, like, it wasn't ask me anything sort of panel discussion. Um, and I think one of the questions, like, what's your favorite dashlet? Like, what's your favorite dashboard within Dynatrace? And I'm like, layer breakdown, absolutely layer breakdown. And there's one thing I think that Dynatrace does better than almost any other visualization tool. And it's carried over. I was very pleased to see this much more. In the old days with the layer breakdown, you had very consistent colors that didn't change. Like for years using Atmon and the layer breakdown, I knew class loading was orange. I knew that logging was green. And so you end up memorizing, like I can look at a graph and the color layers look the same, like a painting. Like that, I know what that color palette looks like. And so I would correlate anomalies in overhead or changes in time spent in different layers with the different, the colors are really blue and green. That means something totally different with the database. And there's inside the new Dynatrace, the layer breakdown is in, I think it's called multidimensional analysis, which is where you can get it. You can not just split series, but you can stack them in interesting ways. But you get that good old layer breakdown, and you kind of have to understand the axes are not, aggregate axes. It's kind of cool. But I found the playing around with the multidimensional analysis to layer all sorts of different stuff from all the different parts of the components. You could see the whole stack, and the colors are consistent. So I'm running in my lab like let's say version 2 of my components, and my customer is still on version 1.x. So they're running some load in the same environment as I work with a customer, and I can see their load comes in and their colors look a certain way. And then when I'm running like version 2, the colors look completely different just because of the way I actually tagged everything. And so that's in terms of distributed tracing. I'm like, I could drill down here and then see, oh, wait a minute, what's this? And boom, there's my multidimensional analysis. I'm like, it's a beautiful thing.
But the product has grown so much now. There's so much things in the product. It's very difficult to know everything and be an expert on every area of the product because there's so many stuff around. But it's amazing. And now the latest stuff that I saw a few minutes ago is that as a preview in the dev tenant, you have the options to if your log stream has a trace ID and the trace as the ID has been ingested, then the logs will be automatically correlated to the trace. So from a log perspective, you have like a link, boom, you click, and then you jump directly to the distributed tracing screen. So then you can correlate one log event to one trace that has been ingested. And I thought it was a pretty amazing and great. And I think in terms of use case, I'm thinking, but there is plenty of use cases to just again we just want to speed up the troubleshooting time, or if you have an issue, to be more faster and more efficient. And I think those small features here and there makes you save a couple of clicks here, save a couple of time there, and you're more efficient at the end.
Exactly. Cool. Well, here's the point in the live stream where we recognize that people haven't joined the live stream, and there's a reason why, Henrik.
I have no idea.
Okay, so I'm forever never going to set up a YouTube scheduled event for streaming, because every time you do it, when you push the button in Restream or something, then it's not the right URL to share with the thing.
Yes, it generates automatically a new URL. So
a new URL, new key, and all that kind of stuff.
So that's a message for Restream, I guess.
Yeah, but I think I haven't looked over on Twitch, but if anyone is watching and they'd like to ask a question, you can ask us anything about performance. You could probably ask us questions about barbecued smoked meats, music, because Henrik and I are both musicians. So if you want to have like a guitar chat, we could talk about guitar. I'm actually holding the a dysfunctional input jack to my bass, my Yamaha bass. So I need to go buy a new one of those. That's a whole other endeavor. But I'm kind of a fidgeter. So if I have something to, so that's what that was. It was very nice.
Yeah, there's no much questions coming in, but what about you? What's the news? I saw that the PerfBytes has started. So could you remind when it is and
on Monday, at least try to get some if it's smaller units, as we usually did PerfBytes podcast, the long form podcast, and we podcast format of multiple hours. So the I decided to do short form things, and they're just tips and tricks, like little ideas to share. And mostly, it's also an excuse for me to try to catch up to you and Leandro in terms of like putting things in video. So I've been working on my ambient lighting and sort of the setup, so that's good. But also, I'm a old school kind of whiteboard person when it comes to teaching. So I use the whiteboard. I've done 2 of them so far. I have started the other one, but I've had a customer escalation. Some other stuff happened. I've been working like crazy. So I missed Friday, right out of the gate. But I'll probably do 2 of them maybe this week. We'll see if I can jump on. But we're doing the live stream here. So that's PerfBytes, which is smaller than a byte. So it'd be just 1 bit of, it's not really an eighth. I guess it could be an eighth. If you think of some of our marathon podcasting at, say, a Dynatrace Perform that goes, for days, it's much smaller than a bit. What's smaller than a bit?
A
You have bytes, bits.
half bit.
Yeah, it could be half bit. Could be upper or lower bits within okay, that could work. Yeah, bits per second, exactly.
And I'm pushing to, here it is. I'm saying it now. That's the latest episode. Oh, I made some changes. Sorry, I need to edit.
Oh yes, you're going to share the PerfBytes URL. We can do that. So one of the things is fun. One I have, and mostly I take stuff from what I'm currently working on. So I've been actually doing a huge project about asynchronous, task-based programming, Henrik, where you've got like async calls within the stack to preserve threading, or you don't have to, with memory, optimize memory, et cetera. In Java, I think you use sort of a Java using futures to be able to preserve worker threads and allow the system to breathe a little bit better rather than being hung up queuing on waiting for threads and things like that, running out of threads. So asynchronous programming is probably, it's got to be more than 10 years, but popularity, I think, in the last 10 years or so, to put it just about everywhere. And so we did some major overhaul. So I'm when it comes to testing for the asynchronous nature, because to the end user or to the API level, there's no difference about it. It's like I generate load and I see it run, and then I'm like, okay, well, yep, I don't see memory. And sometimes memory, like you have to look at working set, not just available bytes or bytes in the operating system. Looking at like a working set to see whether it's actually using more memory or not. Looking at number of threads in use or in flight. If you do a spike ramp up, like how many threads do you create? So you should see it go up and then the threads come down instead of staying up. So I'm going to go over some of that in the next PerfBytes, just little tips on what to monitor if you're going after an asynchronous system. The other thing was multiple load generators. So one of the advantages if you had extreme thread blocking was if I segment the load generators, so let's say I have healthy traffic that's always fast, should never be blocked. And I have other traffic that's also fast, but connected to, say, a simulator on the other end of an asynchronous pool architecture. And I have another set of those threads, a third thread that actually connects to the same imposter, the same asynchronous backend request. And it should also never block, but I'm going to configure that to have a problem, to be very, very slow. So I have these 3 different lanes and totally independent. I should be able to run and introduce a problem over here and see no impact on the main thread group. So that's something we're fine tuning. I work at FreedomPay, which is in the payment space. We can be a totally modern, cool, top of the notch, cutting almost bleeding edge tech stack. But even we have to work with all of these old backend processors that are not necessarily on the latest and greatest interfaces, don't support a lot of the latest. They great security, but they don't necessarily support all the latest protocols or the flexibilities and things like that. So we have to work around some of those esoteric issues as well. Microsoft is not always friendly if you're stuck on .NET 4.8. So there's lots of reasons to keep up with that. So we're working around stuff with some of these asynchronous techniques, and that's been fun. A fun challenge to, instead of just running the same old load test, what other kinds of designs for a load test and monitoring should I do?
But it would be interesting to look at the memory part, because I didn't pay attention to. I thought it was just for me, asynchronous development was more about a, a completely different way of designing. So coding, because you have a couple of things you have to consider when you design that.
Yeah.
But then when you comes to measure, because it's going, I mean, in case of Java, it's going through a JVM. So I was
Yep.
expecting to look at the same type of counters. And now you mentioned other type of memory objects specific to asynchronous code. So I was that is bringing me a lot of interest. So I'll have to dig on this for sure.
Yeah. One way to think about it would be in if you have a file descriptor, or in a completion port, an I/O completion port, where a lot of applications are, they have an incoming stream of web request or some kind of request, and they have the backend external request to a data source or to some other location. So the interesting thing is, if you make those calls asynchronous in between, you're sort of disconnecting yourself from the physical object operating that remote request. And so how do you enforce a timeout? That's a very hard, how do you do that? And then if you sort of if you time out internally and you repeat that request, well, now you're logically inconsistent with the state of that external request. And secondarily, you've orphaned that file descriptor. You've orphaned the completion port, and all of its metadata. So it theoretically would never time out, and you'd run out of sockets. You'd run out of physical capability, and then it becomes a memory leak because that metadata just grows and grows and grows. Aside from the functional issues, this is another one. Another key point for us is, if you're testing functionality not under load for these kinds of asynchronous things, the minute you put pressure on something like this and the timing you got seeing some latency, suddenly the functionality and the business logic itself falls apart. And so it's a really high risk kind of thing that I think we've been working more than a year to figure out exactly the best way to test for it. So that was one of my recent ones to share. But yeah, memory leaks, because if you orphan that other request, it'll never clean up. And also because in the virtual machine, in the core runtime, it's probably saying, hey, I was part of an asynchronous request and I have to pin myself in memory. You can't you can't collect me, you can't garbage collect me, you can't dispose it. I'm going to pin myself because a worker thread might come and pick me up and complete the work. And then they never come. So suddenly you're blowing out all of the cache, all sorts of stuff. So that's a fun one for sure.
And I will also recommend to keep track on the number of threads that you open, because even if you don't set limits of threads on your Java app that you're designing, there is obviously some physical limitations on the environment where you are going to run your code. So even if your code starts to generate thousands of threads there at one certain stage, then there's no thread.
Yeah. In production, again, if you're setting thresholds on something starts to chew threads, which is usually correlated to CPU and memory as it chews up more threads, now you're using memory in these other resources like a completion port, file descriptor, sockets, and you'll run out of those. But all of your traditional triage would be CPU looks okay, number of threads looks normal, but where's that memory? So it's a new challenge to some extent for some people that hadn't really pushed asynchronous. I think asynchronous code generally that really works well in clients where you have a single user and you want to dress up your rendering and you want to make it look smooth and you want to present things that are ready to be presented and hide them if they're not, in terms of the user experience, especially in mobile devices, right? It's a very rich, responsive design. And I think a lot of the practices for developing asynchronous client-side rendering, GUI, those kinds of apps, started being ported into server-based transactional engines, and it doesn't quite match up the same way when you're under concurrent load instead of a single user load sending multiple asynchronous requests. Hey, we have Amit with us.
I saw that Amit is connected. Amit, hey Amit, how are you? If you have any questions, Amit, just drop your questions. Specifically, I mean, yes, it's related to performance, to load test, to observability, to whatever you want. But here it is. Amit is pushing questions. If you can describe on thread pool and database connection settings, is there any formula to set the number for thread and DB connections? That's actually a pretty good question. And I think there is, I won't say that there is a real formula. I think it's more about how your how many connections your and the way your application has been designed, how many connection it needs to interact with the database. Sometimes there are apps that reuse the same connections to avoid opening up and closing down the connection. It really depends. But I think you have to keep in mind that it's like a funnel. So you take a lot of
Mm-hmm.
clients on the web server because you want to take as much clients as possible. Then you go to the layer just underneath the web server, which is probably the application or whatever you want. That will take less connections. And then you go down and more, once you reach to the back, you have almost the lowest connections possible. Because at the end, it doesn't make sense to open the vans on the bottom if you're limiting the number of connection on the top. So everything is somehow related to the number of layers that you have in your architecture. I mean, that's
Yeah.
again my thoughts. What about you?
Yeah. So I think it's also understanding a healthy, fast transaction consumes very little thread time and very little connection time across the stack as it goes back and forth. So if everything runs in the database at 10 milliseconds, if everything in the app server runs at 50 milliseconds, that means you could probably go end to end across the stack for one request in under 100 milliseconds, which means you could do 10 requests a second from that same connection. And if you tune what I call, if you're prematurely or optimistically tuning threads and database pool size, because connections are reused in a pool almost everywhere now. It's just not, it's unheard of otherwise, especially loosely coupled to HTTP type connections. Even if they have a keep alive, there's still multiple connections that are happening and kept alive between the data source and the app server. So the idea that if you tune something and say, hey, we can run with 10 connections in the pool and we can run with 100 threads and we can do just fine if all of your test environment is really, really fast because you don't have a whole lot of data or you're not really doing a huge amount of load with very like a high number of slow moving users uses up threads differently than a small number of really fast users. So that's like you can have one user doing 1,000 transactions per second or 1,000 users doing one transaction per second, and the profile's very different. So think about what the real world is going to look like and then tune the number of threads. One safe formula I use is, hey, we want to have 1,000 transactions per second. I'm like minimum 1,000 threads at a minimum, just to give a full 1 second for every request to go in parallel. Okay, that's a good starting point. Now, if we find that response time is 100 milliseconds, well, maybe I could tune that down to 500, but every now and then there's going to be conditions, transient spikes that come in and be like, wow, oh, that query was really bad. And suddenly it hogs all the threads because all of those transactions are going slow. And you're stuck with a few of these requests. Hey, I'm really fast. Can I please get to the database? And they're like, no, I'm sorry. I'm a really terrible select query and I'm an N+1 problem and I've just hogged everything. So if you tune the system for really perfect conditions, then you also need to do some, what I'd say, negative performance testing or game day scenarios. Terrible data, bad query plan, super slow. Put some latency in the architecture with a simulator or something, and like it's really really slow. And you'll see as those requests queue up, they'll exhaust the thread pool. Oh, wait a minute. If everything was perfect on a perfect day, we could run it with 100 threads and 100 connections in the database connection pool. But on a game day, when something goes wrong, and the Murphy's law, like if it can get screwed up, it will get screwed up. Then you might take more conservative. I'm going to double the thread pool. So whatever we come up with from the test, double it, and that's our safe measure. But yeah, every app is different, and don't idealize the tuning of thread pools and connection sizes. Optimistically. Start with, if I've got 100 transactions per second, I need at least 100 threads. Woohoo! Go for it. And then tune from there. You're like, in a perfect world, leave it at 100 threads. On a really bad day in the cloud, you maybe need 200-300 threads open, available for stuff to run slow. That's what I do anyway.
So you mentioned but game day, yeah, for me it's chaos engineering. Where
Oh,
you
that's chaos engineering. That's like old DevOps, first generation DevOps language there.
I know. That's what I was saying, and that gives me the opportunity to just make some quick promo for Chaos Carnival that happens from the
Yeah.
27th and 28th of January. So if you want to, connect and listen to various speakers, you still have the time to register to be able to listen to all the various speaking track related to chaos engineering in general.
Yeah.
But I think
Awesome.
it makes a lot of sense what you just mentioned, and also what you should probably do is just keep track on this and make sure that you collect that, because if you're going to do some test and verify that your settings are fine, you need to have of course the right monitoring or observability, I would say, to be able
Yeah.
to fine tune this.
Henrik, I
Amit
think
has another.
also,
Yeah.
yeah, he has another question. I'm gonna say another follow up on that is monitoring thread consumption and queuing of requests in whatever architecture you're in. Correlate that with query response time in the database just to see those two. And it's another good reason you want a really gradual ramp up so that you can see how those resources are being consumed as you reach the optimal point of your target load. And if you see, like, you can even casually see, we are going to run out of threads. I'm halfway through my ramp up. I'm at 80% of my thread pool. All right. Don't waste my time. Shut it down, retune the thread pool, and dial it in, and then make your other game day scenarios run. What's Amit? First of all, thank you, Amit, for actually sending us a question on Ask Me Anything, which is pretty
Just
cool.
one thing to add to what you just mentioned. Also, what I used to do in once you are confident with your settings, you should also check out what are the backup or the archive policy of your data. Because if you're running on the application where you know that the data will be sitting there during 5 years because it's related to the business, to I don't know, legal process, whatever it is,
Yeah,
and if you know that the data is going to grow about 60% per year in that database, it makes sense to test, okay, what will be the consequence if I add 60% more data on my database for the first year, and then again 60% to do the second year, and then third year and fourth year. Because if you're testing your settings in an empty database, it's great, you got some conclusion, but what would happen suddenly once I have, I don't know, 5 years of history in my database? Maybe for some reason I get some lot of slow query because maybe the index that we have in place at the moment is not optimized, and you can run
Yeah.
into that situation in the future in the
Yeah.
production environment.
I think there's Henrik, this is a good opportunity to talk about making friends with the DBA team, particularly when you're running a load test. Even if there's not a problem, just ask them, hey, can we just take a look at what the query plan is for these particular top 10 queries? And is there anything hiding in there? In the test environment, if you have a small amount of data, the plan might still say, here's a scan, could be an index scan. And scan is equals slow in the database world. But in your test environment, it might be fast enough to pass the test. But hiding like a performance vulnerability inside that plan is this thing called a scan. And to Henrik's point, 2 years of data growth, even 1 year, 6 months, depending how fast, data growth, suddenly that scan, it actually goes exponential in terms of time consumed. So the scan may be fast in your test bed, but it's still there in the optimizer. And missing index, one of the basic filter triage for management view or so. If you're looking for missing indexes, a lot of the RDBMS have the ability to look for a missing index, or like the layout, a sharding layout is not tagged properly. So if you've tagged in the series something differently, those tags end up operating as indexes. So if you're not tagging as a strategy properly across the shards, and you're like, wait a minute, I'm querying stuff, but the data's so small, it's fast. We pass the test. But there's a vulnerability in there hiding. It's like, wait a minute, we really should have a tag or an index on a particular attribute because get it to at least show up as a seek of some kind. Index would be great. Even an index scan is pretty good, but getting something to seek properly. And I think there's another terminology in the NoSQL. I'm an influx guy myself, and I like using their time series database, but I forget I know their tagging index schema, at least in the new time series database, is pretty cool. But yeah, think about that data growth. That's a really good point because
And you mentioned scans, but I will make sure to avoid having full scan because that's the worst stuff
it's the
things that
worst.
you can have.
But no, let's be honest. A deadlock is the worst because
Yeah, of course.
nobody gets any
Yeah,
work done.
but beware because if you do a load test with yesterday, you ask the project, say, "Hey, can you give me some accounts? I need to do some I don't know, some search and some updates on the account." And they say, and someone from the project is too lazy to create data sets, so it's give you 50 account, and you said, "Yeah, I'm going to load test," so it doesn't make sense. But whatever, you decided to run
Yeah,
because
yeah.
you have too much pressure, so you run your test, and then you search uh, you get the one of the records. This was on your scenario. You update the record, and then after 10 minutes of your test, everything slowed down, and then you see a lot of deadlocks, and then suddenly the first reaction, you turn the red alarm in the office. Oh, hey guys, there's a lot of deadlocks on your environment.
No,
It's
it's the
crazy.
it's the Dynatrace. The Dynatrace UFO goes red.
And at the end, it's just your data. So
Yeah.
yeah, the data set is very important.
All right. So that was good. That was good. We talked all over that. What's Amit's second question here?
So Amit asked the question about what's the future of performance testing? Is SRE the future of performance testing? It's an excellent
Before
question.
we answer, let's use this opportunity to give a shout out to Scott Moore, who and the load tester, who's launched his new channel on the performance tour. And I had the pleasure of being on episode 1. But also, I think Joe Colantonio was
Yeah.
on episode 1, and Joe is one of those like surveyors of our disciplines from testing, performance, security, and SRE. That episode is really good, just talking about the future of performance engineering. But Henrik, go ahead. I just wanted to give a shout out to the Perf Tour,
No,
the
I
load
was
tester
I wanted
himself.
to promote the SMC journal because it's Scott is I like all the effort that you have put in place and the fact that you do some live almost every day. I don't know if it's every day, but it's almost. And you can invite me. I'm not been invited yet. So every day I'm crying, saying maybe someday Scott will reach out to me and invite me on his SMC
Yeah,
channel. No,
right
no,
on.
never mind. To answer Amit's question, I think there are a lot of things that is changing, and I will just cover the SRE piece, and I will let Mark go further on this one. But for me, SRE, it's closer to production. So because SRE, you will be in charge. You do some final tests, you validate, and then you will operate the app. So I think the old fashioned load testing or performance big bang that you were happening just before going live, then this, all right, we can say it's an SRE approach. But again, SRE will do a lot of things with chaos engineering and a lot of things about improve the efficiency on how to manage things in production. So it will obviously do some load tests, but the recent movement of taking the load test and being more smart and testing as early as possible, being part of the CI/CD process, being closer to the devs. This is not SREs. It's part of the DevOps traditional continuous testing, so continuous performance testing. But I would say that there is two distinct objectives. I would say that the performance engineer is helping both sides, where and I see now, if you look at the change of certain colleagues or friends on over LinkedIn, a lot of performance engineers now are transitioning slowly to SREs because they're going to be closer to productions and to manage the real reliability of the production environment. But again, for me, don't say that SRE is going to take over performance testing. It's not the objective for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Future wise, I think it's the past, the present, and the future. To be honest with you, I mean, the in the past we did big bang load testing before there was web ops, before there were web things in the world, and the first generation of all the web 1.0 before that, it didn't scale very well. You threw hardware at the problem to get it to scale because there was like a CGI engine. It was very anemic. The infrastructures were throw a web front on end onto a mainframe or on some other horrible ORM or something like that in between. Uh, and so the operations teams from a IT perspective were very hardware infrastructure, and you threw hardware at the problems. And then the web and sort of web-based architectures changed all of that. So now you didn't throw hardware at the problem as much. You threw hardware and some tuning optimizations in what was very flexible code, non-compiled code, right? I could just, oh, wait a minute, this is a problem. Let me just throw a different size image in there. Boom, optimized. I didn't have to throw hardware at the problem. In fact, I saved a bunch of network just by reducing an image size. Hey, we need to change some caching. Okay, caching header, save, done, solve the caching header. So web ops 20 plus years ago completely changed how we do operations. And so they became more interested in, I can do things like a developer engineer, like a performance tester engineer. I can tune things. There's configurations. There's stuff that's open. It's not just all compiled code. Have a nice day. You want it to be optimized? We have to go all the way through the V model cycle or a whole waterfall all over again. So the fact that we changed architectures to be tweakable in a much more convenient way means operations can make those tweaks at any time. They don't have to do big bang load testing, exactly what Henrik said. So let's take advantage of that. Let's make them, hey, you know those tweaks you guys do to fix problems? Well, some of those problems are performance problems, and SRE are like, they've been doing that for years. In fact, really capable engineering, what are now SRE or IT ops departments, have been doing this kinds of performance work all the time. And if you're in a business sector where there is a performance nightmare, like I don't know, online ticket sales or streaming is another one. If you got into streaming, I mean, if you got into infrastructure, like building the world's largest DNS, that's like you either focus and you pay attention to performance in operations in SRE, or you don't work there anymore, or you go out of business. So I think it's a natural outcome for production engineers to be testing more and be tweaking more and be optimizing more and doing more performance work. So is it the future of performance testing? I don't think so. I think you go where the need is in your career. If you're working in one company or in a community or in an area, there are companies that are like, hey, we don't have all the sophistication in shift left. So we're going to shift you to the right, and we're going to build maturity in those practices. And eventually you might get back to, hey, developers, 25% of the things we're tweaking over here, you could catch these earlier if we just put a few of these, JMeter scripts on your pipeline and do them on every check-in. So always be thinking as a performance tester, I might be working in SRE in ops right now, but I'm always thinking about, hey, could I just make a simple small load test and start pushing that feedback over to the left upstream? And eventually they might say, hey, would you come back and sort of be our continuous performance engineer that works in development all day long? And then the company will build that maturity as well. So it's never, I've worked upstream, shifting so far to the right that you end up coming back into the left, and then shifting to the left so far that you end up coming back into the right. The world is round, especially the IT world is multidimensional and round. So yeah, exactly. Again, thank you. Great questions.
So I just received the Chaos Carnival. I think it's supposed to be the swag stuff of the conference, I guess. So
there you go.
I'm unboxing live. So this is what people do. Unboxing.
Put yourself big, Henrik. We can. Let's see it. Let's do the unboxing. We have a few minutes here. We do have a question.
Do we have another question? It says so. There's one about some Mac settings.
Yeah, I'm not sure. All I can tell you is the M1 that I have on my Mac. I have a MacBook Air M1, and it's beautiful. It runs so nicely and so stable. And I love the small MacBook Air. It's like my favorite portable. But if you've got GPU issues, I have to say, I don't even know where to begin. That's one that I might take to, since it's brand new, I might take it to the store. If you've got it, go check out, get the GPU, have them look at it. There's something else is wrong there.
Don't do some mining, blockchain mining.
Yeah.
So that's maybe you should stop doing this.
Yeah. I have, I build my own PCs, and I do white box, whatever you want to build. And those are, I can tell you about how to tweak GPUs and stuff and that. But when it comes to an integrated vendor platform, especially like the MacBooks, take it to the store, have them look and say, I don't like how this is working. You got to fix it, and just let them do their thing.
Oh, so yeah, I have a congratulation card first. Then we have
so congratulations, Henrik.
An awesome T-shirt from the CNCF. That's awesome. What else do we have? Oh, we have another T-shirt. Wow, what is it? Chaos Native.
That's nice.
Another
I'll
shirt.
just say to Devonshue's, thank you, Devonshu, for your question. We're not really into the hard. You're right. We mostly talk about enterprise IT, server programming, load testing, and web kind of IT techie nerd stuff. Not so much that, but yeah.
Wow, and I got a sticker. So that was the unboxing. Wow.
There you go. What is that?
It's a prize, I think. That I don't see it. I will open it very carefully because it's.
It's very exciting.
Hosted Chaos Carnival. Blah blah blah.
Chaos Carnival.
Oh, you don't see
very
it.
Nice. There you go. It's like a little, and it's a prismatic.
It's prismatic, yeah.
With a chaos thing inside it. You need to put a light on that from behind. Light it up.
Yeah, we'll do it.
I think you could install an LED light underneath it.
You don't see it here. No, no. There's a black. So I need to sort of find a way of lighting it. Well, never mind. But at least I know what I have.
All right, cool.
Uh,
One last question from Amit there. Cloud metrics need to monitor for cloud performance testing. Henrik, we talk quite a bit. We got a question on the holiday live stream that's on the YouTube
correct.
channel. I think we
Correct. The
talked a lot
last,
about cloud stuff, right?
yeah, we had a lot of questions, right? The cloud, cloud testing, performance testing, and then for the metric perspective, I would say cloud is a big buzzword. You have to figure out which cloud native technology are you dealing with. So if you do Lambda functions or cloud functions, or I mean, depends on the cloud provider, of course. But and if
Yeah.
you're running Kubernetes, then obviously the metrics will be fully different. So, Amit, if you can be more specific, that will be very helpful. But like
Yes.
Mark said, the previous Ask Me Anything, we had questions about it. We took quite a lot of time to answer this, so
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you should watch
I
the
would say,
episode.
Henrik, if some folks don't have access to the monitoring of hosts and or functions inside Azure, EC2, whatever it is, right? And so they might not have those raw metrics. So if you're stuck testing a system and it makes a call out to a cloud service, figure out what the architecture is. Is it a serverless function? Is it a service of some kind, right? So like a message busing service or just a data table, a data lake somewhere sitting out on the cloud, or is it a web server host, and or is it a virtual machine that you could get access to? So try to describe that architecture, and then no matter what, when you're monitoring or running load, you're going to look at number of requests per second, throughput, volume, and time. And so those are the two that at least you're going to have as a bare minimum for every load test on the planet. How much load am I creating and how much time is it taking? And what's the correlation between those two? Can I increase the load and time stays flat? Woohoo! That's lovely, scalable. But as I increase the load, I also increase time. Something's backing up. That's not good. So you might be able to share some results with just those two metrics, very basic metrics from the client side under load, and then go talk to the cloud administrator and say, hey, when I run this, can you look at systems and see what's being queued? Is there an error? Is there something else? And they will help you figure out what metrics. All the classic metrics are there: CPU, disk, memory, network, queued, threads, all the stuff is there. It's just the cloud convenience. Oh, you want to monitor that? You have to pay a little bit more, and you need the premier thing. That can happen. I mean, there can be reason. There's also can be, well, I'm the cloud administrator, so I don't give you access to. Well, let me take a look, kind of thing. There can be some distance that happens as well, and you want to build a relationship, some trust with these people. Say, hey, yeah, hey, we're collaborating here, and I'm generating some interesting results, but I don't know what's happening on the back end. Can you help me understand or take a look when I run the test and make sure that it's there? So to Henrik's kicking off our Ask Me Anything about observability, observability is the ability to observe, right? So, and also get answers about what's happening without having to, completely, toil the earth and completely start over and, rip everything apart. Everything should be inherently, hey, that's just a monitor, that's just a metric, and it's not something super painful. Someone has access to those metrics on the back end. Just build a good relationship with them and have them
And
share it with you.
and also, I would definitely recommend, if you test anything, we mentioned that on the previous Ask Me Anything, make sure on the first test that you do to disable any auto scaling feature. Make sure
Yeah,
to test only one small instance to figure out how many threads or concurrent connections or concurrent user or it's able to handle, and then from there you can understand the footprint and then
yeah,
start to design how much when do I need extra nodes, because again, keep in mind that auto scheduling is a feature, but sometimes it requires like almost 10 minutes to get your extra node fully up and running. So in 10 minutes a lot of disaster could happen. So make sure that the thresholds that will trigger that extra node has been fine tuned. So you, that so in order to make sure that the extra node will come in time and not too late, because otherwise it will be just a disaster. And also in terms, like Mark said, understand which technology could be in whatever it's Azure or AVS or GCP, depending whatever the cloud providers, they
Yeah.
are a solution. And probably I think now these days when you talk about cloud native technology, there is a big chance that you have Kubernetes behind the scene. So
Yep.
try to understand Kubernetes, make sure that you are collecting the right metrics. And probably if you're dealing with a cloud native app, maybe the developers has been quite fancy and they have implementing a sort of open telemetry stuff behind, which means your application is producing data, it's producing traces potentially, it's producing metrics. So then make sure you collect them, because you won't pay extra for that. It's been produced by your team, so you just need to have something that collects it and then store it somewhere in the backend to visualize and analyze it. but uh,
Yeah.
but we can
Uh,
talk about this during hours and hours, and I think we are running out of time now. It's already top of the hour.
we are. My one tip to admit, last thing he posted there is if it's on Azure or Azure, whatever it is. I also am in Azure. One thing I can tell you is there is the ability to create a read-only account of like a viewer role in your Azure dashboards for your company. I think that could be a goal, and you might have to earn a tremendous amount of trust uh, to ask for this. If it's possible, could I have at least a viewer only or a read only account to log into Azure, so when I'm running tests, I can grab some screenshots or even export some data. Um, that's one thing you should try to look at, and at least as a goal, say maybe you'd be lucky enough to get that access. It took me a while to get it as well. I'm in a highly secure uh, company, like in terms of PCI and all sorts of other compliance. But yeah, so think about that as well. Henrik, this was great.
It is, it's fun. So I hope that you all enjoyed. We will keep put that in your calendar. Remember, every third Thursday,
Or
Tuesday,
last Tuesday of the month.
last Tuesday, that would be better. Yeah, the last Tuesday of every month, there will be an Ask Me Anything on all the various social networks where PerfBytes is currently present. So just note down your questions during those 3 weeks, and then the last week we will answer to all of your questions, and we promise for that.
There's it. We'll answer them to the best of our abilities for sure.
Of course. All right. So let's conclude then. So Mark, do you want to start conclude your conclusion?
I'll just give a shout out. Tune in weekly on Fridays. I'll try to keep the perf bits thing going, little tips and tricks. It's not tremendously different than being asked questions here on the Ask Me Anything, but at the same time, a shout out to the various sponsors of PerfBytes over the years. Obviously, we've done a lot of work with Henrik in the Neoload world, which is now with Tricentis, and so thanks to the Tricentis folks a bit. They also have the Flood product over the years. Thank you to Tricentis for this. We mentioned a bit about Dynatrace, but I shouldn't forget the News of the Damned podcast has been sponsored by Catchpoint APM, and they have web page tests now. They have some interesting web perf things that are popping. So hop over there. Tim Kadelik's over there. Henry, I think, is over there. Some really, really cool guys to follow in the Catchpoint APM world. And then our good friends, Ryan Falk and Falk Consulting. Ryan still has, we've known him for years, and I remember hanging with you guys at Perform, and he's got a bunch of the old super guru performance folks that have done just about every kind of thing you can imagine. Like if you need that kind of level of advice, that expertise, check out Ryan Falk Consulting. But yeah, thank you to the sponsors for sure. And thank you, Henrik, for coordinating and doing all the wizardry, especially with your blinky light. The way it comes through is it's like space age. It's like you're in Star Trek.
And I also want to give a shout to PerfByte Press, to just remind everyone, PerfByte has now is producing books. There are a few books available. Just without mentioning it, Alejandro Melendez, Senior Performo, has come out with a really awesome book around performance. So if you're new to performance and you're dealing on day-to-day issues related to performance, yeah, just read the book. It's very easy to read it, to consume. So check out on PerfByte Press. And James also did a book on interviewing on the performance world. It's a great book. And I think there's
Yeah.
another third book that released about security, I guess. No.
Yeah, he's working on another one.
Yes.
I forget what it's a side one. And then, who knows, maybe someday I'll put one out. I don't know. We'll see.
All right.
But yeah, PerfBytes Press. You can get them on Amazon. I think they're in Kindle form as well. But if you get a chance to see Henrik or Leandro or James or I, we probably have copy. We'll sign books for you. That's what I miss out. The pandemic. We don't do the book signing thing. That's a big part of doing a book. I just want to do a book signing.
All right.
It would be fun.
For me, it was fun. Let's meet in 3 weeks then. For now, 1 month. 1 month for now. So we have plenty of time to collect your questions. So thanks for being connected. Thanks for the questions, and enjoy your day then.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
See you. Bye.
Ciao.